The wind that sweeps across central Illinois is a living thing. It has no mountains to stop it, no oceans to slow it. It flows over the flat, black earth like a river, carrying the smell of a deep, rich perfume of soybeans and corn. In October, that wind turns sharp. It carries the almost burnt scent of the harvest, a signal of the coming winter, a warning of the hard frost that will lock the prairie. And in the city of Decatur, that wind picks up another, heavier scent, the distinct, thick, and clinging odor of soybean processing from the A.E. Staley plant. It's a smell that blankets the town, a constant reminder of the industry that built it, the industry that fed it. In 1994, it was also the smell of a city under siege, not from crime, but from itself. The bitter 76-day lockout at the Staley plant had just ended, leaving a scar of picket line violence and neighbor against neighbor resentment. Down the road at Caterpillar, a strike was tearing families apart. Decatur was a city with a chip on its shoulder, a blue-collar town that felt betrayed, angry, and on edge. It is a pragmatic, no-nonsense smell. It is the smell of work, of grit, of a place that prided itself on reality. And it was this reality that made the city feel, paradoxically, safe. The dangers here were economic, not existential. People worried about their jobs, not their lives. This wasn't Chicago. This wasn't L.A. This was Decatur, a place of high school football, on Friday nights at St. Teresa's, of potlucks at the First Presbyterian, of neighborhoods where people still left their back doors unlocked for neighbors. It was a place that believed deeply and fundamentally in its own mundane safety. That belief was a foundation as solid as the black prairie soil. And on October 21st, 1994, that foundation cracked. A fissure ran through the heart of the city, revealing a darkness no one had ever thought to look for, a darkness that would be swallowed by the earth itself. Sarah Jenkins was 19 years old, and she was a product of that perceived safety. She was a sophomore at Millikan University, Decatur's small private liberal arts college, a leafy oasis of brick and ivy that stood in stark contrast to the industrial grit of the city's north side. She was studying music education, a practical dream for an impractical passion. She was the kind of daughter every parent in that town dreamed of, meticulous with her studies, responsible with her money, and possessing a kindness that seemed to radiate from her. She had her father's easy, booming laugh and her mother's pensive, dark, watchful eyes. She played second-chair flute in the university orchestra and worked 20 hours a week at Bookworld, a chain bookstore in the Hickory Point Mall on the north side of town. On the morning of October 21st, she'd had a hurried conversation with her mother, Karen, in the kitchen. "I have to go straight to the grind after work," she said, grabbing her green JanSport backpack and stealing the last Pop-Tart from her 14-year-old brother, Mark. "Amy and I are cramming for the theory midterm. I'll be late, probably after midnight." "All right, honey," Karen said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Just be careful. That mall parking lot is so dark." "Mom, I'm fine," Sarah laughed, rolling her eyes with the affectionate impatience of a 19-year-old. "It's Decatur, not Gotham City." She dodged a pillow Mark threw at her, grabbed her flute case, yelled, "Try to shower this week, dweeb," at her brother, kissed her mother's cheek, and was out the door. Sarah's life was a metronome of predictable, comforting rhythms. Class, practice room, study hall, work. Her world was contained within the 10-mile radius between Millikan's campus, the mall, and her parents' modest ranch-style house in the suburbs south of the city. She drove a faded blue 1986 Toyota Tercel, a high school graduation gift, its hatchback filled with sheet music, textbooks, a pair of running shoes, and a crumpled McDonald's bag. She was a normal girl, in a normal town, living a normal life. Her shift at Book World started at 4 p.m. The mall was quiet for a Friday. She and her co-worker, a junior named Beth, gossiped about a professor. Around 7 p.m., a man came in. Beth noticed him because Sarah tensed. He was an older man, maybe in his 40s or 50s, wearing a worn-out baseball cap and a thin jacket. He didn't look like a mall shopper. He went to the military history section, pulled out a book on the Vietnam War, and stood there, not reading, just watching Sarah as she restocked the Stephen King display. "That's the guy I told you about," Sarah whispered to Beth at the register. "He's so creepy. He just stares." "Just ignore him," Beth whispered back. "He'll go away." After 20 minutes, he did. He bought his book, paid in cash, and left without meeting Sarah's eyes. She visibly relaxed, shaking her shoulders. "Gives me the shivers," she said, and went back to work. At 9:02 p.m., Sarah cashed out her register, her manager signing off on the tape. The mall's security camera, a grainy black and white VHS feed, caught her walking out of the employee exit. Her backpack was slung over one shoulder, her black hard-shell flute case in her other hand. She waved to Beth, who was walking to her car in a different row. The camera recorded her walking under a flickering orange parking lot light. Then she stepped out of its frame. She was supposed to meet her friends at The Grind, a campus coffee house, at 9:30. At 9:40, her friend Amy looked at the door, annoyed. Sarah, the most punctual person she knew, was late. By 10 p.m., Amy's annoyance had curdled into a knot of worry. She'd paged Sarah's beeper twice, with no reply. She walked to the payphone at the back of the coffee shop and dialed the Jenkinses' house. "Mrs. Jenkins, is Sarah there? We're all waiting for her." Karen sat up in the recliner, the Afghan pooling at her feet. The house was quiet, picket fences playing on the TV. "What? No, Amy. She should be with you. She left work at 9. She never showed up," Amy said, her voice starting to thin. "We tried paging her." Karen felt the first icy prickle of unease. "She's probably just held up. She'll be there." But as she hung up the phone, her hand was trembling. Sarah was never late. By 10:30, Karen had called Book World, confirming Sarah had left on time. She had called the campus security office. No one had seen her. She called her husband, David, at the Caterpillar plant, pulling him off the night shift. "David, something's wrong. Sarah never met Amy. She's not answering her page." By 11 p.m., David was home, his face grim, still in his work boots. He and Karen got in their Ford Taurus, driving Sarah's route, mall to campus. Their headlights cut through the dark, empty streets of Decatur, revealing nothing. They drove it again, mall to home. Nothing. They drove to the campus, checking the parking lots, then back to the mall, peering into the now empty, cavernous lot. David's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "She's a 19-year-old kid, Karen," he said, his voice a low growl of forced calm. "She's out with someone. She forgot. She'll be in trouble when she gets home. But she's fine." "No," Karen said, her voice flat, staring out the window. "She's not. Something is wrong." By midnight, they were at the Decatur Police Department, standing under the harsh fluorescent lights of the lobby. The desk sergeant, a man named Henderson, with a face that had seen too many late nights, was polite but unconcerned. "She's 19, ma'am. She's probably just out with friends. Decided to go to a party. Forgot to call. It happens every Friday night. She's an adult. Legally, she's not even missing for 24 hours. She'll turn up in the morning, hungover and embarrassed. "You don't know my daughter," Karen said, her voice shaking with a sudden cold rage. "Something is wrong. I am not leaving until you put out an alert for her car." Sergeant Henderson sighed, looked at the clock, and handed them the missing persons form. "Fill this out. We'll put out a bolo for the vehicle. But ma'am, she'll turn up." But Sarah didn't. Saturday was a gray, agonizing blur of frantic calls to emergency rooms, to friends of friends, to distant relatives. David and Karen, along with Sarah's 14-year-old brother, Mark, and a small army of Millikan students, fanned out across the city. They taped missing flyers to telephone poles, the wind ripping the first few from their hands. The flyer showed Sarah in her high school prom dress, a forced smile, braces glinting. It was the only recent photo her parents had. The girl on the flyer looked impossibly young. The discovery came on Sunday morning, 40 hours after she was last seen. A man named Gus Peterson, a retiree in his late 60s, was casting his line into the murky, cold waters of Lake Decatur. He was in his usual spot, an isolated gravel turnaround off Peripheral Road 28, a place known mostly for teenagers parking and late-night fishing. He saw the car immediately. A faded blue Toyota Tercel pulled deep into the gravel, almost hidden by the scrub oaks. It hadn't been there on Friday. He walked over. The car was locked. He cupped his hands and peered inside. He saw a backpack on the floor, a musical instrument case on the back seat. He saw no one. He felt a cold dread that had nothing to do with the October morning. He walked back to his truck and drove to the nearest pay phone. The police arrived, sirens silent. And then, so did Karen and David Jenkins. The bolo had been for this car. A patrolman had heard the call and intercepted them on their way to the police station. They were kept back by a line of yellow tape, but Karen knew. "That's her car," she whispered, her hand gripping David's arm so hard her nails left marks. "Oh God, David, she's in the lake." That became the immediate assumption. She'd been robbed, or worse, and dumped in the lake. The police used a slim jim to open the driver's side door. The sight inside only deepened the mystery. On the passenger floorboard sat Sarah's green JanSport backpack. Her wallet was inside, containing $42 in cash, her university ID, and her bank card. Her textbooks were there. Her flute case was on the back seat. But her keys were missing. And so was Sarah. "It makes no sense," Detective Miles Corbin said. He had just arrived on scene. Corbin was a 20-year veteran with a face like a road map and a voice that sounded like gravel. He was a good cop, methodical and thorough. But this scene gave him nothing to hold on to. It's like she just evaporated. She's abducted, but they leave her wallet. They steal her, but they take the time to lock her car. Why? And why throw her keys? Where is the... He stopped himself. He looked at the faces of Karen and David Jenkins, standing by the tape, and walked over, taking his hat off. "We're going to find her, ma'am," he said. It was a promise he would come to regret. The Decatur Fire Department's dive team spent 2 days dragging the cold, silty bottom of Lake Decatur. Their visibility was near zero. They worked by feel, their gloved hands sinking into a foot of mud. The silt was so thick that a diver's light couldn't penetrate 6 inches. Twice, the line tender on the boat felt a tug, a diver's signal for a possible finding. The first time, it was a waterlogged deer carcass. The second, a submerged shopping cart. They found tires, a tangle of fishing line, and 1,000 broken beer bottles. They did not find Sarah Jenkins. The investigation, now officially a high-priority case led by Corbin, turned to her life. But Sarah's life was an open book. They interviewed the ex-boyfriend, a fellow musician at Milliken. He sat in the interview room, a scared, skinny kid in a flannel shirt, weeping. He had a rock-solid alibi. He was in a 6-hour orchestra rehearsal, confirmed by 40 other people. "She was the nicest person I knew," he sobbed. Who would do this?" They interviewed her friends, her professors, her co-workers. Everyone said the same thing. Sarah was happy. She was stressed about midterms, but not despondent. She was not suicidal. She was not the type to run away. She was a good kid. Her co-worker Beth, from Bookworld, told them about the creepy guy. "He was creepy," she said, twisting a napkin in her hands. "He came in a lot, an older guy, maybe 40s or 50s. He'd buy military history books and just watch Sarah. He'd stand in the aisles and just watch her. She noticed it. She told me he gave her the shivers." "Did you get a name? A license plate?" Corbin asked, leaning forward. Beth shook her head, tears welling. "No. He paid cash. He was in that night. An hour before she left. She pointed him out to me. Oh God, Detective, I should have walked her to her car." The description was vague. White male, medium height, wore a baseball cap. It matched 10,000 men in Macon County. Corbin's team put out the description, but it led nowhere. They canvassed the area around the lake. Gus Peterson, the fisherman, was a good witness. But Corbin also found another, an elderly man named Mike, who had been out late on Friday night, checking his lines. He recalled seeing a dark-colored sedan, maybe a Ford Taurus or a Chevy Caprice, parked near the turnaround at around 9:30 p.m. "I saw a fella standing outside it," he said, "smoking a cigarette. It was too dark to see a face. I just figured it was kids parking, so I minded my own business." A dark sedan. The creepy guy. It was all they had, and it was nothing. The 1994 investigation was hamstrung by the technology of its time. DNA was a new, expensive tool, and they had no biological evidence to test. No blood, no hair, no fibers. There were no cell phone pings to track, no GPS data, no digital footprint. Sarah Jenkins's life was recorded on paper, in class schedules and bank ledgers, and all of it had stopped, perfectly in order, at 9:02 p.m. on a Friday night. Corbin, desperate for a lead, ran a list of known sex offenders and peeping toms in the area. One name jumped out. Scott Miller, a 38-year-old with a record of window peeping, who lived less than a mile from the mall, and he drove a dark blue Chevy Caprice. For 3 weeks, Miller became the entire focus of the investigation. They brought him in. He was shifty, sweating, full of nervous tics. He denied everything. He claimed he was at a bar in Springfield, an hour away, all night. Corbin knew he was lying. They got a warrant for his car, tore it apart. They found nothing. They polygraphed him. The results were inconclusive, suggestive of deception. Corbin was sure he had his man. He pressed, he threatened, he leaned on him. And on the 20th day of the investigation, Miller's alibis came through. A state trooper in Sangamon County had arrested him for a DUI at 10:15 p.m. on October 21st. He'd been in the county lockup all night. The timeline was impossible. Corbin had to let him go. He had wasted 3 precious weeks. The case went ice cold. The search was suspended in mid-November, as Illinois' brutal winter set in, freezing the lake and covering the prairie in a hard shell of ice. For Karen and David Jenkins, the world had stopped. David returned to his job at the Caterpillar plant, his movements mechanical, his eyes vacant. He was a man who believed in work, in providing, and this was a problem he could not fix. His silence grew, a wall between him and his wife. He aged a decade in a year. But Karen began a vigil that would consume the rest of her life. She turned Sarah's bedroom into a shrine, dusting the furniture, leaving the posters of the Indigo Girls and REM on the wall, the sheet music for a Mozart concerto still open on the stand, as if Sarah had just stepped out for a moment. Her brother Mark, 14, watched his mother fade into this grief. He watched his father recede into silence. He would later say his childhood ended that October. He felt invisible, a ghost in a house haunted by a different ghost. He hated the bedroom shrine. He just wanted his sister back, and if she couldn't come back, he wanted his parents back. He got neither. Karen became a fixture at the Decatur Police Department. At first daily, then weekly, her calls to Detective Corbin became a ritual. "Miles, it's Karen. Anything?" And his reply, which tore a small piece from him every time, "No, Karen, not today. I'm sorry." He dreaded her calls, the quiet, desperate hope in her voice. And yet, he never stopped taking them. He was the only link he had to the investigation, and she was the only one who wouldn't let him forget. Meanwhile, in a small apartment on the edge of town, a 46-year-old man named Thomas Vance went to his night shift at the A.E. Staley plant. He was a security guard, a loner, divorced for 10 years. He clocked in, walked his rounds, and looked out over the massive industrial complex. He'd walk past the new grain silo, C-14, its concrete foundation still curing, and he'd nod to the construction workers. He was a quiet, unremarkable, invisible man. He read the stories in the Herald and Review, his face impassive. He watched the news reports, and he went to work every night, walking over the very secret that was tearing the city apart. The years passed. 1994 became 1995. The missing flyers, sun-bleached and water-stained, tore away from the telephone poles. Millikan University graduated the class that should have been Sarah's. The Book World at Hickory Point Mall closed, replaced by a GNC. The case, once front-page news, was relegated to small, on this day, anniversary blurbs. Every October 21st, Karen Jenkins placed a single advertisement in the paper. It was Sarah's prom photo, and underneath it, the words, "We are still waiting. Someone knows. Please." On the 10th anniversary, in 2004, a local reporter interviewed Karen. Her hope was brittle, sharp. "I know someone in this town knows something," she said, staring into the camera. "You can't keep a secret like this forever. God will not let you rest." David stood behind her, out of the camera's frame, his hands in his pockets, his face hollow. Mark, now 24 and in law school in Chicago, hadn't come home for the anniversary. He couldn't bear it. Thomas Vance, now 56, saw the interview on the 10 o'clock news. He watched Karen's face, felt a flicker of something, annoyance. Pity? He wasn't sure. He turned the channel. He went to bed. He had to be up for his shift. Detective Miles Corbin retired in 2005. At his retirement party, he gave a short, gruff speech, thanking his colleagues. He ended it by saying, "I've closed every case I was ever handed, except one, and I will take that one with me. We failed you, Sarah." He boxed up his copy of the Jenkins file, the real one, with his unofficial notes and theories, and put it in his basement next to his fishing gear. He'd drive the route sometimes, mall to lake. What did I miss, kid? What did I miss? The case was handed to a new detective, who handed it to another. The file box grew thicker with administrative reports and reviews, but no new evidence. In 2017, the Decatur Police Department, following a trend in modern policing, formed a small one-person cold case unit. It was assigned to Detective Anya Sharma, a sharp, tech-savvy investigator in her late 30s. She had grown up in Decatur. She was 10 years old in 1994. She remembered the flyers. She remembered her own mother warning her, "Don't you ever park at the lake." The Sarah Jenkins case was the local ghost story that had shaped her childhood. Sharma was the first to look at the case with fresh eyes and new tools. Her first act was to visit Karen Jenkins. Karen, now in her late 60s, was frail. David had passed away from a massive heart attack just months earlier. His heart, Karen said, had simply broken from 23 years of unresolved grief. She sat with Sharma in her silent house. "You're new," she said, not unkindly. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Detective Sharma. I'm taking over Sarah's case, officially." "What are you going to do that Miles Corbin couldn't?" "I have new technology, Mrs. Jenkins. I'm going to resubmit everything." Sharma was true to her word. She resubmitted the few items they had: a stray fiber from the Tercell's carpet, a fingerprint fragment from the outside door handle, for modern DNA analysis. The test came back inconclusive, too degraded, too partial. She tried to run it through genetic genealogy databases, but the sample was unusable. She ran the vague, creepy guy and dark sedan descriptions through new databases, cross-referencing known offenders. It produced a list of 500 potential names, an impossible haystack. She went to see Miles Corbin, now in his 70s, living in a small house by the real Lake Decatur. He was happy to talk. He brought his basement file box up to the kitchen table. "Here's what wasn't in the reports," he said, his voice still gravel. "My gut. It was the bookstore guy, Sharma, the creepy fella. We had nothing. No name, no car, no anything. He was a ghost. He saw her, he watched her, and he was smart. The lake, that was a plant, a diversion. He wanted us to look in the lake. He was smart, and he was local." Sharma left Corbin's house with a new sense of determination. She focused on the bookstore. She tried to track down old Bookworld employee lists. The company was defunct. The records were gone. She re-interviewed Beth, who was now a mother of 3 living in Arizona. Her memory was faded, tinged with 20 years of guilt. "I just remember his hat," she wept over the phone. "A baseball cap, and he paid in cash." Sharma hit the same wall. The case was a perfect black hole. A locked car, a missing set of keys, and a ghost. Sharma felt the same cold frustration that must have haunted Corbin. The crime was perfect, sealed by the passage of time. In 2022, Karen's health was failing. Her son Mark, now a partner at his Chicago law firm, came down every weekend. He begged her to move, to come live with him. She refused. She could not leave the house that Sarah was supposed to come home to. For 28 years, Karen Jenkins had woken up every morning and faced the same empty question. This year, she was too weak to place the ad in the paper. The break, when it finally came, arrived not with a flash of forensic brilliance or a new witness stepping from the shadows. It came with the banal, antiseptic beep of a hospital heart monitor. On November 9th, 2022, a 74-year-old man named Thomas Vance was dying in the oncology ward of St. Mary's Hospital in Decatur. He had no family. Pancreatic cancer had hollowed him out, leaving a skeletal figure awash in pale blue sheets. He had been a patient for 3 weeks, mostly delirious from the pain and the morphine, his nurses accustomed to his pained, incoherent murmuring. Brenda Reeves was a night nurse, a 30-year veteran of the oncology ward. She had seen more death than most funeral directors. She was efficient, compassionate, and tired. Her feet ached. At 3:15 a.m., she was in Vance's room, checking his morphine drip. The room was dark, save for the glow of the monitors. Vance had been quiet for hours, his breathing shallow. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open. They were, for the first time in days, utterly, terrifyingly lucid. He grabbed her wrist. His grip was a cold, bony claw, but surprisingly strong. "I have to," he rasped, his voice a dry crackle. I can't meet God with this." Brenda gently tried to free her arm. This was ICU psychosis, she thought, or just fear. "It's okay, Mr. Vance. You're safe. God is a forgiving God. Try to rest." "No." His voice was a sudden, desperate command. It echoed in the small, dark room. "You have to listen. I killed her. I killed the girl." Brenda froze. Deathbed confessions were common. Patients confessed to affairs, to stealing from their jobs, to lies they'd told their children. This felt different. The terror in his eyes was not for his own soul. It was for something else. "What girl, Thomas?" she asked, her voice calm, the one she'd used to talk down a sundowner patient. "The girl from the bookstore," he gasped, fighting for breath. "The musician girl. From the college." Brenda Reeves's blood ran cold. She had been 20 years old in 1994. She had grown up in Decatur. She, like Anya Sharma, knew the local ghost story. She had been a sophomore at Millikan, too. She hadn't known Sarah, but she'd known of her. The name felt like a profanity in the dark room. "Sarah," she whispered. Thomas Vance's face crumpled. It was a terrifying sight, a skull crying. He began to sob, a dry, racking sound. "Jenkins! Sarah Jenkins! I didn't mean to." She screamed. I just wanted to talk to her." He was fading, the effort costing him everything. His eyes rolled back. I put her where no one would ever... The concrete. At the plant. C-14. His hand went limp. He was unconscious again. Brenda stood there for a full minute, her heart hammering against her ribs. She paged the floor supervisor, her hands shaking. "Call the police," she said. "You have to call the police. Right now." At 3:19 a.m., the call came into the Decatur dispatch. The dispatcher, a young woman, was skeptical. "A nurse, ma'am. You said a patient confessed?" But she escalated the call, as per protocol. The on-duty homicide sergeant, recognizing the name, Sarah Jenkins, immediately paged Detective Anya Sharma at home. At 4:30 a.m., Sharma, in a trench coat over her pajamas, her hair uncombed, walked into St. Mary's Hospital. She met a pale, trembling Nurse Reeves, who recounted the conversation verbatim. "I've been a nurse for 30 years, Detective," Brenda said, her hands shaking. "I've heard 100 confessions. This was the first one I believed." The hospital's legal counsel was roused, and by 5:15 a.m., Sharma and her partner were in Thomas Vance's room with a digital audio recorder, authorized under an exigent circumstances waiver. Vance was awake. The morphine had been reduced. He was in agony, but he was present, and he wanted to talk. He saw Sharma's badge and nodded. Are you the police?" he whispered. "Yes, Mr. Vance. I'm Detective Sharma. I'm here to listen," Sharma said, her voice soft, her heart pounding. "I want to confess," he said. And for the next 45 minutes, the story that had been a black hole for 28 years unspooled in a weak, rasping monotone, interrupted only by coughs and the beep of the monitor. Thomas Vance had been a 46-year-old night shift security guard at the A.E. Staley processing plant in 1994. He was a loner, divorced for 10 years, living in a small apartment on the edge of town. He told Sharma he'd first seen Sarah at the Book World. He thought she was pretty, that she looked kind. He started going to the mall just to watch her. He was the creepy guy in the military history section. He learned her schedule. He learned her car. He said he just wanted a girlfriend. On October 21st, he'd waited in the parking lot for her to get off work. He said he just wanted to ask her out. He was lonely. He followed her faded blue Tercel in his car, a dark blue 1990 Ford Taurus, the sedan from the Fisherman's Report. He followed her car through the dark streets. He didn't know where she was going. When she stopped at a red light on 22nd Street, he'd tapped her bumper with his own, a staged fender bender. Sarah, startled and angry, pulled over onto the shoulder, which happened to be the gravel access road leading to the lake. He pulled in behind her. He got out. She got out, angry, looking at her bumper. "You hit my car," she'd yelled. "I'm so sorry, miss," Vance told her. His voice, he said, was shaking. "I just wanted to talk." He said he told her she was pretty, that he'd seen her at the store, that he wanted to take her for coffee. She got scared. Her anger evaporated, replaced by cold fear. "You're the man from the bookstore," she said. "Leave me alone." She told him to leave her alone and reached back into her car, grabbing her keys from the ignition. She turned to run. "She screamed," Vance whispered to the audio recorder. "It was so loud. In the dark. I panicked. I thought someone would hear. I grabbed her." She fought him, scratching at his face. He hit her, a backhand, knocking her down, but she screamed again. "I hit her," he said, his eyes squeezed shut. He'd grabbed a tire iron from his trunk. "I just wanted her to be quiet. I hit her once. She fell. She didn't move. Instantly silent. I stood there for a minute, the prairie wind howling, the only sound. I knew I'd killed her." He was a security guard. He knew about police procedure. He knew about evidence. His mind, he said, went cold and clear. He put her body in his trunk. He took her keys from her hand. He went back to her car. He saw her backpack and flute on the seats. He left them. "I wanted them to find it," he said. "I wanted them to look in the lake." He took her purse from the passenger seat and threw it on the floor to make it look messy, like a robbery. Then he locked the car door. He walked to the edge of the lake and threw her keys as far as he could into the water. He drove back to his apartment, parked his car in the garage, and went inside. He showered, scrubbing the scratches on his face. At 11 p.m., he reported for his midnight shift at the Staley plant, clocking in on time. "I was the only guard on duty for the entire C sector," he rasped, "a massive industrial complex of silos and processing vats. They were pouring a new foundation for a new grain silo, C14. He said his mind was clear. He knew what he had to do. During his rounds at 2 a.m., he drove his car to the construction site, an area of freshly poured concrete, 20 feet deep, still wet. The arc lights cast long, yellow shadows. He was the only soul for half a mile. He opened his trunk. He rolled Sarah's body into the wet concrete. It sank slowly. He used a long piece of rebar to push her down, deep into the slurry, until she was gone. I watched the concrete trucks come the next morning. From my guard shack, he rasped. They poured another 6 feet on top. I knew no one would ever find her. She was part of the plant. He had lived with that knowledge for 28 years. He'd never married again. He'd never been arrested. He'd retired from Staley in 2011. A quiet, unremarkable, invisible man. He'd watched the case on the news. He'd read Karen Jenkins' ads in the paper every October. He said the guilt didn't start until he got sick. I couldn't sleep, he told Sharma. I kept seeing her face. In the dark, screaming. He finished his confession. His eyes closed. He had given up his secret. Detective Sharma sat in the quiet, her mind racing, the audio recorder still on. Thomas Vance died 36 hours later, on November 11th, 2022. The confession was a dying declaration, admissible in court, but Sharma knew it wasn't enough. She had to find Sarah. The A.E. Staley plant, now owned by a different multinational corporation, was still in operation. Silo C-14 was a massive, 150-foot-tall concrete tower filled with millions of bushels of corn. Sharma, along with the state's attorney, met with plant executives. It was a tense meeting. "You want to do what?" the plant manager said, his face pale. "You want to demolish a load-bearing foundation? That silo holds 1.5 million bushels. It's impossible." "He confessed," Sharma said, placing the audio recorder on the table. "He told us where she is. She's 20 feet under your silo. We're getting her out. You can help us, or we can come back with a warrant that will shut this whole plant down." The operation to recover Sarah Jenkins began 2 weeks later, after the silo was emptied, a logistical nightmare that cost the company millions. It was not a delicate excavation. It was a demolition. A construction crew, the same kind that had buried her, but with new faces, was brought in with jackhammers and concrete saws. They had to cut through 28-year-old, steel-reinforced industrial foundation. They worked for 3 days, the noise deafening, the concrete dust thick as fog. Detective Sharma and a forensic anthropologist from the state police stood by, watching. On the 3rd day, a jackhammer operator stopped. He'd hit a different density. The work switched to hand tools. At a depth of 22 feet, beneath layers of concrete and rebar, they found her. She was skeletonized, encased in a tomb that had perfectly, chillingly, preserved her. The forensic team found the clothes she'd been wearing when she left the mall. And there, resting on her sternum, they found a small silver flute-shaped necklace, a gift from her parents for her 18th birthday that Karen had forgotten, in her grief, to even mention. The medical examiner confirmed the cause of death, catastrophic blunt force trauma to the skull, matching Vance's confession. Detective Anya Sharma did not make a phone call. She sat in her car for 10 minutes, just breathing. Then she drove to Karen Jenkins's small ranch house, the same one Sarah had left on that October night. She sat with the elderly woman, now 76, in her living room, surrounded by photos of the smiling 19-year-old girl. "Karen," Sharma said, her voice thick, "we found her. We found Sarah." Karen looked at her, her eyes searching, not understanding. She hadn't processed the words. What do you mean?" "He confessed," Sharma continued, her voice breaking just once. "The man who did it. He died, but he told us where she was. We have her. We're bringing Sarah home." Karen Jenkins closed her eyes. She did not cry, not at first. She simply put her hand over her mouth and rocked, a long, low moan escaping her. It was the sound of 28 years of suffocated grief, of a question that had defined her life, finally, terribly, being answered. "Where?" she whispered. Where was she all this time? Sharma took a deep breath. She was at the Staley plant. She was buried there, the night she went missing. Karen looked out the window toward the north, where the plant's steam stacks rose against the sky, a sight she had seen every day of her life. She was here, she whispered. All this time, she was right here. A funeral for Sarah Jenkins was held on a cold, bright December day. The church was overflowing. Her friends from Milliken came, now middle-aged, their faces etched with the same shock they'd felt as students. Her brother Mark stood tall, his arm around his mother, who sat in a wheelchair in the front row. In his eulogy, he spoke through tears. For 28 years, my sister has been a ghost story, a cautionary tale. But she wasn't. She was real. She was my sister. She stole my Pop-Tarts and taught me how to drive. And now, she's finally home. Retired Detective Miles Corbin sat in the back pew, 78 years old, weeping silently into a handkerchief. He held a single, faded, missing flyer in his hand. After the service, he walked up to Anya Sharma. He didn't say anything. He just grabbed her hand and squeezed it. "You did good, kid," he said, his voice thick. "You brought her home." The city of Decatur, which had carried the ghost of Sarah Jenkins for a generation, mourned with her family. The case had finally, officially, been closed. The prairie wind still blows across central Illinois. It still carries the smell of the harvest, the smell of the earth, the smell of the plant. But for the city of Decatur, and for two detectives, one retired and one active, and for a family that could finally grieve, the air felt clearer. The secret that had been buried in concrete, a foundation of darkness beneath the town's feet, had finally been brought into the light. The case of Sarah Jenkins was not a story of forensic genius, but of human conscience. A story that proved that no secret, no matter how deep it is buried, can be kept forever. And that justice, even when delayed for 28 years, can still, in a way, find its voice, even if it's just a whisper, in a dark hospital room.